Hey there, it's Logan Christopher with the Legendary Strength Podcast, and I'm here with my good friend Tyler Bramlett, who has previously been a guest on the call. I figured I'd get him to jump on here, and we just sort of go back and forth talking about specifically what I'd like to address is various forms of pressing and getting a stronger press. So thanks for joining me today, Tyler.
Sure, man. Thanks for inviting me on the call again. I love getting out there and talking to people, especially about training and, getting better.
Yep. All about that. So I guess a good place to start with is, can you give sort of like your foundational ideas on, why is a press important and different ways that people can approach it?
Sure. The press is a very important movement. People talk about, the different movements of the human body. They talk about, if you're looking at the upper body specifically, they talk about that vertical plane press and pull, the chest press and pull, and then kind of your dip curl kind of range, that lower press and pull. And the thing that we got to realize is when your arms are down by your sides, it's really easy to use them, right? And it's really easy to root them into your body. So, as an experiment, if you guys are listening right now, you can just take your hands by your hips, and you can make some fists, and you can squeeze every muscle, and you can see how easy it is for you to fire your core, your glutes, your lats, your pecs. Everything can fire really easily in that position. But take your hands overhead and try that same drill. Squeeze your glutes, squeeze your pecs, squeeze everything. It becomes very challenging for you to actually utilize those muscles in that overhead position. So to me, I think the press is a really great exercise because it strengthens you through a range of motion. And who is it? Steve Cotter, who I think once said, the position of most compromised. And so that's just kind of my general view on why I like the press so much is because it does so much more than just educate your shoulders how to work. It educates your body how to work in a position that's very challenging for it to work in. Does that make sense, Logan?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I'd like to address, the most widely done press is not overhead pressing, but the bench press. So
sure.
What are your thoughts on that as an exercise? I know a lot of people say it sucks. I really like how Drew Patrick put it, obviously very strong in the bench press and a lot of other presses as well, but he was saying most people say that because they suck at it. So they're just trying to, dog that exercise, say it's not important.
And I'll tell you, Logan, I was one of those people. Right?
Oh, yeah, me too.
Because I could get under a bar. I think my best bench press ever was 255, right? Which is just really not anything special considering, what's Drew Patrick benching, 400 raw or for reps? 500, yeah, okay, so that makes me feel like a little girl, right?
Yeah.
So I can definitely relate that I could be one of those people, this and that. But here's something that's really interesting is that when you do the bench press right, when people teach you how to get into a good position, how to press from the lats, how to do that real powerlifting style bench press, not only will you build that barrel-shaped chest, but you're going to be tremendously strong. And as evidenced by you hanging out with Drew Patrick and running your superhuman training workshops with these really strong guys, they take their bench press and they transfer it to their overhead press, provided they maintain their mobility. It's going to transfer pretty well. And I don't know very many people these days who have a standing barbell press of over 200 pounds, but I would be willing to wager that most of them have a very strong bench press at the same time. So I think a bench press is a good exercise. I don't particularly practice the bench press very much myself. In fact, not very often at all. I had a little kick a few months ago where I wanted to learn how to bench press a little bit more, but then I realized it contrasted with way too many of my other goals. And so, if I'm trying to work on ring strength and stuff like that, the bench press is going to help me add a lot of mass and size and strength to my upper body, which isn't exactly going to complement that body weight style strength training that I'm really going for. So I think it's a fantastic exercise. I think it's pretty dang close to being the squat of the upper body if you're looking at the most bang for your buck mass builder out there. But it's not for everybody. And don't bash it just because you suck at it or because you think it's unfunctional. The bottom line is it's one of the most functional upper body exercises out there. I just choose to focus on other things because I like to express my body through movement a little bit more, and I'm not actually concerned with adding crazy amounts of bulk to my frame.
Right. So a lot of people will talk about you have the different planes of motion, and you mentioned that before, like the dip where your arms are down by your sides, then you have that horizontal bench press type action, then overhead. Is it important for people, in your opinions, to work all these different planes of motion, or can you really just choose one press and stick with that?
Oh, absolutely. And so I'll let a cat out of the bag on this one, Logan. I'm going to give your listeners one of the coolest pressing exercises I've ever seen. And this is actually a new program that I just created. And not many people know about this exercise. But, so most of your listeners are probably going to know about a Turkish Get Up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the Turkish Get Ups are a really cool exercise because it takes your shoulder through a full range of motion, and it teaches you kind of stability and mobility components as you go through the exercise. You can't do the Turkish Get Up with perfect form without being fairly mobile. So if you guys haven't seen the Turkish Get Up, go on YouTube and click it. I'm not going to describe how to do a Turkish Get Up over the phone because you'll never get it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the exercise, and this kind of covers what you were just talking about, is imagine a Turkish Get Up, and imagine these steps. So you're on your back, and you come up to your elbow. Then the next step would be coming up to your hand. The next step would be popping your hips up. The next step would be bringing your legs through into that side bending position. The next step would be a kneeling position, and the final step would be standing. At each one of those positions, press the weight through a full range of motion. And so you can use a kettlebell, a dumbbell, a sandbag, a barbell. It doesn't really matter, just as long as it's a weight. But as you do your Turkish Get Up, at each one of those 7 positions, you're going to do a press through full range of motion. So it look like this. I roll over my back, I bring it up, I roll up to my elbow, I press through a full range of motion. I come up to my hand in the seated position, I press through a full range of motion. I pop my hips up, I press through a full range of motion. I drag my leg through to that side position, I press through a full range of motion. That one's a weird one, by the way. And then I come up to a kneeling position, I press through a full range of motion, stand, press through a full range of motion. That is one of the coolest pressing exercises out there because you literally take your shoulder through a full range of motion, and by adding the presses into it, you actually create that bent arm strength along with that straight arm strength. And so that's something that I've used on myself as well as many of my personal clients, not only to get stronger in the press, but to kind of reshape the way their shoulders move. Because if you can't press through different ranges of motion, you get kind of like locked into a particular way of pressing. And so it's kind of a cool way to kind of shake up the mindset or the mental challenge of doing this exercise, as well as being able to press through these different kind of mobility pieces. It's a really cool exercise.
So that's 6 presses in one?
It's 7. Yeah, 7. So
okay.
Press on you might have missed the first one, the press on the back.
Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
So it's a cool exercise, 7 presses. And so, here's my rule of thumb. Sorry to interrupt, but I'll do a set of 1s, and if somebody can do 3 sets of 1 at each position, then I'll do a set of 2s at each position, and then I'll do a set of 3s at each position. If somebody can do 3 sets of 3s at each position, not only are they going to burn their shoulders out like crazy, right, because you're doing 21 reps of the press through different ranges of motion, right,
mm-hmm.
Then I'll basically add about 5 to 10 pounds and then just go up from there. And that's how I do that double progression with that particular exercise.
What do you usually use for that, dumbbell or?
Well, here's I like kettlebell personally because I have kettlebells that go up in 4-kilogram increments. Right. But if dumbbells are fine in 5-pound increments, what I do with my kettlebells is I set a goal for men and women to achieve, and it depends on kind of what the woman's goal. Like if a woman tends to take on bulk, I don't do this exercise because then they'd be doing too many presses, too much hypertrophy training. I'd just rather stick to the Turkish Get Up. But an example for a gentleman, like I would say I try to get them to a 24 kilo to the point where they can do 3 presses at each position, right? And then once they get to that rate, then I'm going to take them back to a 16 kilo and have them do it bottoms up.
Wow.
Which, if you've never done a bottoms-up Turkish Get Up and press with a 16-kilo kettlebell, you've never experienced a press, man. That is a hard exercise to master.
Wow, that's cool. So what do you call this exercise?
I call it the Turkish Get Up and press. That's it. I guess I should call it the Turkish Press Up or something like that.
You should probably call it the Bramlett Get Up or something.
No, you know what? I can't take credit for it. It was actually at the first Superhuman training workshop that I can't remember his name. One of the guys there described it to me, and he said that's how he learned how to press really strong. And I said, what? I've never heard of that before. And I took it home, and I was actually having some shoulder issues, and I was doing the biofeedback stuff where I was testing movements, and for like a month and a half straight, Turkish Get Up and press and one-arm rows tested good every single day. And by the time that month and a half was over, not only was I pain-free, but I felt twice as strong as before.
Wow, that's really cool. So what sort of weight have you worked up to doing that exercise?
In that exercise, 24 kilos regular style, and then in a bottoms up, I didn't get all the way through a 20 kilo, but I've been trying to get the 20 kilo in the bottoms up style when I practice it. So I can do the 16 bottoms up, which is pretty fun, but the 20 kilos eluded me. It's that side bend position, I tell you, it's a tough one.
Yeah, that's a really cool exercise. I'll have to give that a try because I've not done that one before, and I understand it. I mean, like you're saying, it works the shoulder in all ranges of motion with full ranges of motion. So if you're looking for something that will get you strong and mobile at the same time without spending a lot of time, that sounds like a great exercise for it.
Exactly, because you get to work that bench press range of motion in there too, but also you're going through these different positions, so you're working that core stability at the same time, which is, as you know, is pretty key when it comes to developing all-around real-world strength.
Yeah, cool. So one thing I want to talk about as well is the idea some people go with body weight only, and you can work a lot of presses with that, and then all the different sort of weighted presses. How do you mix and match and bring those together? Because I know you do a lot with both as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's critical that you divide your training into those two components that you just mentioned, Logan. One side is learning how to move your body better, and the other side is learning how to move external objects with your body better. That's kind of like, if I can put the crux of my philosophy, it would just be those two things, right? You're either going to learn how to move stuff better or move yourself better. And so bodyweight training is super critical. And I feel like people who get married to weights and don't do any bodyweight training, they're short-selling themselves. And then vice versa, people who do just bodyweight training but don't do any weights, they're also short-selling themselves. However, I would probably lean a little bit more towards I'd rather see somebody do a lot of bodyweight and a little bit of weights than a lot of weights and just a little bit of bodyweight. That being said, there's some really cool exercises. So what I do is I do what's called movement progressions, right? And if you guys have seen the convict conditioning books or if you've been in gymnastics for any period of time, everybody's coming up with these movement progression things. But as you and I both know, Logan, it's all just kind of like a sexy form of gymnastics. And the reason why people are catching on to this is because gymnasts are the strongest people out there. I mean, you can't do anything that they can do, but they can pretty much do everything that you can do. Right? Mm-hmm. It's just incredible the way these guys learn how to move their bodies, and they learn how to do that through a movement progression. So I'll give you like a real simple kind of movement progression that I use with a bodyweight pressing exercise. So I'll start with something like the kneeling push-up. Just a crazy simple exercise that everybody should be able to do. And the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that they have symmetry. So when somebody's doing a kneeling push-up, their hips aren't kicked out to the side or they're not rotated or twisted in some funky direction. If they're not symmetrical, then I'm going to focus on improving that symmetry through some drills that I use in terms of feeding the flaw or having them avoid contact with something to keep their posture perfect. And then I'll basically get them through a full range of motion so that their arms can come all the way back behind them and they can do that full kneeling push-up. Now, here's the funny thing is some of you guys listening might be like, ha, 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 kneeling push-up, whatever. You come to my house and do kneeling push-ups with me, you're not going to be laughing anymore. Because if you do a push-up right and you take everything through its full range of motion and you move properly, sometimes it can be much more challenging than you think. So the kneeling push-up is something I start literally everybody out on. People don't move past that super-duper quickly. It takes a little while before they get to the point where I can trust them with full push-ups and more challenging exercises. So from the kneeling push-up, once you get about 3 sets of 10, I know it's a age-old goofy thing, but 3 sets of 10 seems to work really well for most people, especially when they're beginners. I'll move them to a full push-up. And we'll keep all the same stuff. We'll keep on working on those same form and everything. And once they get to about 3 sets of 10 on that, then I'll move them up to an extended range of motion push-ups. So you can use a pair of push-up handles or blocks or anything. So that way you can go through a more full range of motion. That way we're working on that increased mobility and stability component at the same time. And so once they get through that, then I'm going to start transitioning them into handstand push-ups. And that's where the fun begins, Logan, is getting somebody, from a push-up position and teaching them how to do wall walks, so they're walking towards the wall and back to kind of improve that handstand position. And then from there, getting them into a back-to-wall handstand position, learning how to kick up against that. And then I'll do a progressive range of motion thing, which sounds sexy, but really what I'm doing is I put like 5 phone books down, and I just have them do head to phone book and do handstand push-ups like that. Yep. And then I take a phone book off once they get 3 sets of 5 or 3 sets of 3, and we keep working our way down to the point where they can do a full-range handstand push-up. And then I usually freeze people there for quite a long period of time just because I want to see them develop mastery in that position before we go to more complex things like full handstand push-ups or, as you and I are both working on those freestanding handstand push-ups. Mm-hmm. So I think that – go ahead.
Yeah, just wanted to relate a story on this topic that really you can have so much fun playing with what you do because you and I, we both do a fair amount of hand balancing, and I've been working on the freestanding handstand push-up as well as other variations of it. Recently, I started really concentrating on the tiger bend, which is a very cool exercise that I've dreamed of being able to do for a while. Haven't quite got it yet, but I'm working on it and getting really close to having it. And for people that don't know what the tiger bend is, that's where you start in a forearm stand. where the length of your forearm is on the ground, and then you basically shift over till you're on your hands and then press yourself up. The cool thing that happened to me was just by working on this, I wasn't really working on the freestanding handstand push-ups, which when I've been doing them, I have a goal of 5, so I take a fairly wide base of support in order to shorten the range of motion. But in training the Tiger Bend, you can't go wide at all. In fact, you have to go very close, and it puts a lot more stress and difficulty on the triceps. So just in training that, then I went back to doing those freestanding handstand push-ups, and they were easier than ever before, and I actually blew through my goal of 5 and hit 6 of them. So I was very happy with that.
That was a cool video, man. That was really cool.
Yeah,
I had my best ever is stuck at 2.
Yeah.
I got to figure out how to get that balance better, but you bring up a good point with that handstand push-up. Like, people talk about pressing exercises and this and that, and everybody wants to know all this, like, mystical magic, and it's like, hey, if you could work up to the point where you can do 5 full range, so you may be on the edge of a bench or something where you come all the way down hands to chest, freestanding handstand push-ups. Now, that may sound impossible to you listening right now, but it's always possible with a proper movement progression, right?
Yep.
If you can go from kneeling push-ups to regular push-ups and regular push-ups to extended push-ups, well, then you can go into vertical pike presses and handstand push-ups and extended range of motion handstand push-ups to freestanding or face-the-wall handstand push-ups to tiger bends and beyond, right? So don't short sell yourself. But think about it like this. If you could press a barbell that equaled your body weight, right, and then the guy next to you could do a full-range freestanding handstand push-up, could you do the freestanding handstand push-up? No, I don't think it's going to happen. Even though you guys might have the same quote-unquote strength level, I seriously doubt you'll be able to do that movement. But I'll bet you that guy is going to pick up that barbell that weighs his body weight, and he's going to throw that thing overhead like it's nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, it's just you have to think about when you're looking at building incredible amounts of strength and a body that looks as good as it performs, you have to think about the exercises that give you the most bang for the buck. And the handstand push-up and those push-up progressions are definitely those exercises.
Yeah. One cool thing about the hand balancing as well is you are, depending on how you move, you're taking your shoulders through different ranges of motion. If you take the prone press as an example, you're starting basically laying on the ground, and then you press yourself into a vertical handstand position. And in doing that, you're going from like something like a bench press to an incline press to an overhead press while moving through that. I suppose there's some machines that could work that same range of motion, but it can't be done with a barbell or any sort of weights without having some sort of pulley system. So it's really cool. And one thing I know a mistake I've made in the past, I believe you have as well, is just getting stuck on the whole overhead pressing, thinking that that's way more functional. But if you're not doing some form of horizontal pushing, that really is going to come into play if you're trying to go to these much more advanced press exercises.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. It's so funny that kind of kicked me in the ass on that one was, I've been doing presses for a long, long time. I got really hell-bent on presses about, it's almost been like 10 years. So, anything from one-arm presses to barbell presses to then kind of looking at the Olympic lifts and learning how to do clean and jerks. And I'm a huge fan of, like, one-arm weighted exercises. Maybe we could talk about that next. But one of the big things, I like you said, I avoided the bench press. I avoided kind of push-ups and stuff like that. And I'm just now really starting to see the benefit from just making sure you train every range of motion, and just so that you're well prepared for everything and that your body can kind of do anything. Because not only could I'd go down and try to crank out a set of push-ups, and it's like a set of 30 was hard. I'm like, this is bullshit. But I can go up there and do a set of like 15 handstand push-ups. I'm like, that's not a good ratio. I need to build better horizontal pushing strength. And then, to top it all off, my wife goes, well, you got great shoulders and, you're a really broad-chested guy and stuff, but, your pecs kind of look weak. So that had me thinking about, really working on the ring dips and the muscle ups and a lot of ring work. I have a good time doing ring work. Plus, you look at gymnasts and their chests are just chiseled from steel. So I do like the hint of pec look, but apparently my hint was a little too small. So I've been working on that horizontal plane a little bit more with the body weight stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, let's talk about some more weighted stuff as well, because that was decent overview of body weight progressions, what you can do. So you mentioned the one-arm weighted work. What do you like doing with that?
Oh, man. You know what? To me, there's nothing more fun than putting heavy shit overhead with one hand, right? I just plain and simple, you know, because here's the funny thing. It's like I've been experiencing the Olympic lift for several years now, and I coach a couple people in Olympic lifting, and I really enjoy it. But it is so technical, and I'll spend a year with somebody just getting their form to the point where I can trust them to test their PR. You know, like an entire year, 3 days a week, an hour each time. And it's just so hard to coach that via online. You know, it's so hard to take that passion and be like, hey, you got to Olympic lift at home. And then, you know, the CrossFit gyms are doing it and everything like that. But 9 times out of 10, these guys don't know how to coach this shit, right? So that's why I like the unilateral version of those exercises so much. Like the one-arm clean and jerk, talk about an awesome exercise for your entire body, and talk about something that's fairly easy to coach and fairly low risk in a lot of ways, at least a lot lower risk than the barbell version, right? Mm-hmm. So that's why I really like that unilateral stuff. Plus, like I said, there's just nothing feels better than putting like heavy weights overhead with one arm. You know, you have a big audience of people who were old-time strongman fans, and they really looked at these old-timers who were just shredded and crazy strong, and they had strong ligaments, and they were just freaks of nature, and we always wonder how they got so strong. Well, you know, part of it was, you know, a healthier planet. The other part of it was good food. But I think, and honestly, a huge portion of that was these unilateral heavy lifts that nobody does anymore. I mean, when's the last time you went into a gym and saw somebody do a one-arm snatch?
You don't. Well, I haven't been in the gym long time, right? But yeah, no, it doesn't happen.
You seldom see someone doing a one-arm press, right?
Yeah.
Let alone like a one-arm jerk or a push press. Or if they're doing a push press, it's usually for a cardiovascular capacity. It's usually not for a strength capacity. So I think honestly the one-arm push jerk or the one-arm push press or the one-arm split jerk, any sort of variety of just that one arm getting dumbbells overhead while you kind of use your legs for a little bit of help, that is one of the coolest exercises out there. Plus, you know, people are always talking about core, right? I want to make my core stronger. I'm going to do Pilates. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. When's the last time you held a dumbbell overhead that was like, you know, say 100 pounds or more, and you didn't feel your core working?
Yeah, it's insane.
It's one of the nastiest core exercises out there is holding heavy weights overhead.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I spent some time after, you know, studying a whole lot on what Arthur Saxon did especially, but like you said, a whole bunch of the old-time strongmen just going through in those exercises, also things like the side press or the bent press.
Bent press, yeah.
They're just not done a whole bunch, but like you said, taking something heavy and putting it overhead, there's a whole bunch of different ways you can do that, and you build insane strength by doing just that.
Yeah, you totally do. And it's, you know, the other thing that I think about is, too, like, you know, that's where hand balancing and that single arm lifting comes in so handy, is that you can focus so much on, like, one small thing. You know what I mean? Like, with the 2 arms Olympic lifts, there's so much more to think about. With the one arm, like, push jerk or push press or whatever, all you're thinking about is that one arm and that weight getting overhead. Right? Mm-hmm. You can take so much of your attention and put it on that one hand. And then in hand balancing, you're moving slow and you're having to work with balance and coordination as well as strength. And so that brings so much more attention to your position. And so I feel like those are just great exercises, not only for like building strength and building muscle and everything like that, but they're going to improve your coordination, your balance, which to me, like, I have this goofy theory that the more coordinated you are, the more your brain works in a bunch of different ways. The more your brain works in a bunch of different ways, the smarter you are, the faster you can think through problems. So I think that, you know, one-arm jerks make you smarter.
Nice.
If I got to sum up what I just said, one-arm jerks are going to make your life better.
Yes, I concur. I think that's very cool stuff. And really, so let's actually talk a little bit about this. How do you put it all together? Because, you know, talked about a lot of different weighted exercises, doing body weight stuff. How do you blend that together without doing too much?
Totally, yeah. That's a great question, Logan. So we talked about a bunch of different cool lifts. Now, here's the mistake that most people make, myself included, is doing too much way too often, right? Like, so to me, like, you know, you have things like the one-arm presses and the push jerks and things like that. Like, take an exercise and pick one thing you want to do. So if we're talking about specifically the press, okay, let's say your shoulders are kind of feeling funky, you know, you have like an overfiring pec and you want to kind of reshape your shoulder and build some strength. Well, I would probably work you up to doing that Turkish Get Up and Press, right? And on top of that, I wouldn't add any more one-arm pressing into the mix. It's not going to help you at all, right? So I usually what I recommend is this. I have people focus on an exercise for anywhere between 2 weeks and 6 weeks, and they work up in a simple double progression, like so add reps or add sets, and then once you get to so many reps and so many sets, add weight and start back over, right? And then I usually couple that with something like a two-arm version, you know? So for me, I think one of the coolest things that I like to do is like either a Turkish Get Up with presses, or every once in a while I'll get on like a bent press kick or a one-arm push-jerk kick. And I'll just pick one of those exercises. I'll make that my weighted exercise. And then I'll work on something else. It might be a muscle-up, so I can work on that dip portion. It might be a handstand push-up. It might be a ring push-up or a ring fly, so I'm kind of working that frontal press. Literally just picking anywhere between 2 and 4 things and just sticking to them for like a number of weeks, like 6 weeks. And then if you're digging on them, you know, pick them again for the next round. And if you're not digging on them, just try something different. But the whole key is don't overwhelm yourself by doing every single exercise every single day, because you're not going to get any good results, because you're not building the skill of the movement. And I just don't have time to do that. So, you know what I mean? Like, I just don't have time to do everything all at the same time. Some of the old-time lifters could do it, but you look at their training schedule and they spend like 6 hours a day training or 8 hours a day training. Yeah. So if you got an hour a day, pick 2 movements, have fun with it, go through the movement progressions on the body weight. I also recommend people do movement progressions with weights. Like, I don't recommend you just jump out there and do one-arm jerks. I think you should do some one-arm presses, then some one-arm push presses, then some one-arm push jerks, then some one-arm split jerks, so you can work up that skill of movement too. And then just pick a couple things and cycle through. I mean, I really have a hard time with this because people want rocket science, but it's really all about just picking good exercises, getting better at the movements, focusing on them for a little bit, and then switching them up and just constantly trying to get better at the exercises. Not necessarily, you know, hundreds of reps and this and that. Just get a little bit better each day, each month, each year, and that's when we see like some really, really powerful changes when people can build that upper body press strength.
Yeah, I think that's a very good message and something that I'm even learning more and more myself, just to focus on fewer and fewer things, but do them right, do them till you get good and consistent progress and hit your goals. Then after that time, you can change things up. So in all the exercises we talked about today, just like Tyler was saying, focus on 1 or 2 of them and get that to a certain level, then move on to some of the other variations without trying to do them all at once. You can do them all, just spread it out over time with consistent, focused action on doing it. So
totally. Let me patch real quick. Just I want to say one more thing about that. Sorry, I'm getting all fired up about this topic. Like, just if you're at home, like think about this, okay? I'm gonna say weights for gentlemen, so ladies don't get all intimidated if I'm saying some crazy weights here. But imagine a body, like if you had this body that could do a one-legged squat with 100 pounds, and then you could do a barbell back squat with 400 pounds. And then you could do a prone press to handstand, right? And you could do a one-arm chin, and you could do a front lever, and you could do a one-arm push jerk with 150 pounds. Like, imagine that body. It sounds crazy, right? But what did I name? Like 6 or 7 exercises, right? Yeah. And that person could be not only fit, they could not only be looking good naked, they could not only be strong, they could be like all of these things at the same time, and they never had to get out of sight of their head and focus on all these other things. I mean, you could do 4, 5, or 6 exercises for the rest of your life and end up being stronger, fitter, perform better, and look better naked than everybody else around you who's like, you know, just inundated with millions of different exercises. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I really think people need to get that point.
Yeah, very cool. So just to wrap it up, you have a brand new product coming out now. I'm curious if you could give just a few details on what that is and really how it ties into everything we were talking about today.
Oh, totally, man. Yeah, so I've been chipping away. I've been launching a bunch of new products about everything I talk about over the last 8 months, and just trying to get my message out there of movement progressions and what I'm now calling real functional training. And I'll touch on that real quick just because I think this is something cool. So real functional training, REAL is an acronym that I created because I see way too many people, when I said functional training, they thought I was doing pink dumbbell curls on like a floaty disc or something like that, right?
Right.
So I said real functional training is when you learn how to move better. So R stands for realistic movements, so no foofy bullshit. What would you actually have to do in real life, okay? Realistic movements, all right? Then executed with perfect form. So I want to make sure that people are doing things the way their body is supposed to be doing them. And I won't go into the debate between biomechanics or not, but I want to make sure that people aren't doing things that they're going to damage themselves, okay?
Right.
A is at a high intensity. So we want to be lifting heavy. We want to be going at that high intensity when we're working up the speed, right? And then the last part is L, to build a body that looks as good as it performs, okay? So that's what I've been talking about now, is just the real functional training. So the program I'm launching this week is actually an upper body program, and it's going to take people through all this stuff we kind of already talked about. I do teach like the Turkish Get Up and Press in that in great detail. I do go through all of the push-up movement progressions and show some really cool push-ups that most people haven't ever heard of. And the whole goal is to take someone from struggling with a kneeling push-up to like getting to 20 pull-ups, working towards their one-arm pull-up, getting their muscle-ups down, getting their handstands down, getting their handstand push-ups, their one-arm push-ups, and so on and so forth. So it's just all about just progressing you from simple stuff to more complex and difficult stuff. That way you can play with the big fun exercises and just have a great time in your training.
Well, awesome. I look forward to checking that out myself. Like I said, that Turkish Get Up and Press exercise, that sounds like a fun one. I think I'm going to go play with that a little bit right after we get off the call.
If you guys don't do that exercise today, you're high. It's like, it is literally one of the biggest gems I've ever found in terms of an upper body movement. It's just fantastic, and I've tested this with numerous people now, is that people who have like shoulder issues that aren't structurally related, so they don't have like a torn rotator cuff or anything, people who just have those muscle imbalances, within about 30 to 60 days of doing a Turkish Get Up and Press a couple days a week, almost everybody's shoulder pain disappears.
Mm-hmm.
It's really interesting to me. And if you guys have shoulder pain out there, I'd love to hear your feedback. Don't do something if it hurts, if your physical therapist tells you not to. But I'd love to hear your feedback if you take on the self-fix format like I've done and I've worked with some clients on as well. And I just really, I think that it's just a wonderful exercise for building that strength through all ranges of motion and building that bulletproof shoulder.
All right. Well, excellent. Any final things forgot to cover?
No, man, I'm just here to have fun and preach the real functional training message.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Tyler, and thank you, everyone, for listening. Go and try those exercises, and be sure to, let Tyler know how they go for you. Also, you can leave comments on the blog where this will be uploaded. I have links and everything. You'll see more stuff coming out this week. I might be throwing in a bonus as well if you decide to pick up Tyler's program. Might be something to do with what we talked about today, but you'll have to wait and see what that is. So thank you very much.
Sure, man. Thanks for having me on the call. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.